I just want to do a quick piece on two subjects that have been getting a lot of press recently. BJ Penn continuing his fight career and the ongoing conflict between Cyborg and the UFC. In both instances, they're kind of flip sides of the same coin in that the UFC is essentially devaluing an asset that might leave. Because that's how you have to see fighters. If you're a promotion, is their assets. They have value. How do we increase that value? How do we decrease that value, depending on which way the asset is going? In constantly going after Cyborg, Dana White is setting the table for if she leaves, she was afraid. She's running from Emmanuel Nunez. So wherever she goes, she'll have less value. And anything she accomplishes under that banner, it's, oh, she's doing all this because she couldn't beat Emmanuel Nunez. The UFC has been very good at that when it comes to fighters in free agency. It's, if they leave, it's because we didn't want them. So what does that set the table for? Anything they accomplish in another promotion does one of two things. Either they're successful, in which case that promotion sucks because a cast-off from our roster is kicking ass. Boy, that promotion sucks. Or that fighter loses and everybody goes, oh, Dana was right to get rid of that person. They're shot. So it starts out with the narrative that we didn't want them. They're not good anymore. With the case of Cyborg, that's a harder sell because she's still winning, obviously. You saw Spencer fight. So she's afraid. So as soon as she leaves, it's because she was afraid. That's the narrative that will get pushed. And a lot of fans will accept it. Some won't, some will. So that's part of it. We're going to devalue this asset. So if it leaves, it has less value than when we had it. For BJ Penn, and I've said this earlier, discussing this problem, BJ Penn, I think the UFC will fight him until he is incapable of fighting. For a couple of reasons. Number one, Bellator is starting to make some inroads in Hawaii with Ilima-Lei Macfarlane, who's a bona fide star. The last thing they want is an Ilima-Lei Macfarlane main event and a BJ Penn co-main event in Hawaii. They don't want that. So, okay, if BJ Penn wants to keep fighting in the UFC, we'll keep having him fight. We will devalue him. We will have him fight until he just can't do it anymore. So that if he does leave, there is no value in that asset. All the value of that asset will be used in the UFC. So it's cold-blooded, but it's logical in that if BJ Penn wants to fight for somebody, we're going to make sure it's us. BJ Penn doesn't want to fight anymore, great, retired, whatever, wonderful. If he wants to keep fighting, he will fight for us. Until 20 losses in a row, doesn't matter. As long as he can pass medicals, we will have him fight. That way, we will just wring the value out of that asset until there's nothing left. Now, the elephant in the room for BJ Penn. First off, I want to address a couple of the, just in my opinion, idiotic criticisms of fans who don't want to see BJ Penn fight anymore. You're not a doctor, what would you know? And I've seen a lot of fans do that. I know Dana did his at a press conference too, to a reporter. You don't have to be a locomotive engineer to see a train wreck. You know a train wreck when you see one. It's simple logic. Getting beaten up the number of times BJ Penn has gotten beaten up is not good for you. His skills are clearly eroding. A casual fan who knows nothing can see that BJ Penn now isn't anywhere near what he used to be. And he's taken a lot of shots he didn't take in his younger years. Anyone can see that. You don't need a medical degree to know that getting hit in the head over and over isn't good for you. And the erosion of his skills, which any MMA fan can see, makes that much more likely. So it's just ridiculous. Anybody can see that BJ Penn isn't what he used to be, and getting beaten up over and over again isn't good for you. Don't need a medical degree for that. It's pretty obvious. The second thing that I've seen from a few fans is, well, he's not getting knocked out in these fights that he's losing. Muhammad Ali was never knocked out. Sugar Ray Robinson was never knocked out. Both fighters quit on their stool for different reasons. These guys had long-term brain damage. I don't know how people think CTE works, that if you're never carted off the field on a stretcher, your brain must be okay. That's not the way it works. Just getting beaten up over and over without getting knocked out messes your brain up. I can tell you stories, but I won't, about fighters that you guys don't know about, going backstage after wins where they won a fight and looked fine, who couldn't remember where the hell they were. Didn't know that the fight was over, and they won. I've seen this multiple times. Fighters that you think would be okay, they were in a tough fight, but never got knocked down, or never got knocked out in the fight, and they're still like, "Where am I? What's going on here?" And they won the fight. So it doesn't take a lot. Brain is fragile. You're not supposed to get hit. So the idea that he's not getting knocked out or he's not getting laid out, I mean, it's idiotic. That's not how brain damage works. It's a lot of micro shots, a lot of micro concussions. That's what does the damage. So that's ridiculous. The fact that he's not getting knocked out means he should continue fighting. It's ridiculous. The elephant in the room here, the bigger issue that isn't getting, I haven't seen any traction about it, but there's virtually no mechanism outside of promotional choice that keeps a big name from fighting over and over and over again, that keeps an old fighter from fighting over and over and over again. There's no mechanism to keep them from doing that. Meaning, of course, you need to pass a medical check to get licensed in a state. They are all over the board. All over the board. Nevada's tough. California's tough. New York's tough. Other commissions require almost nothing. Almost nothing. It's just, if you want to fight in podunk commissions who don't have a lot of experience, for the rest of your life, loss after loss after loss, you can do it. Nothing will stop you. If you mess around on SureDog and start looking at records, there are fighters with way worse records than BJ Penn who fought for years, still fighting, some of them, who have no business being in there. Loss after loss after loss. Now, it's usually a small fight in the middle of nowhere where the commission is just not on it. Also, the medical checks that I've seen, now I haven't taken a medical check in 12 years for fighting. Obviously, this is the last time I fought. 13 years now. If you can stand up and touch your nose 5 times, when I took it back, it wasn't sanctioned when I first started fighting. And then they started sanctioning it and you had to do a medical check. Anyone could do it. Anyone. You had to stand on one foot and touch your nose. Okay, your brain's okay. Really, I'm not exaggerating. You had to stand on your foot and do this. And then they gave you 3 words. And then they did some other stuff and they asked you the 3 words. And if you remembered them, you had to do some simple math problems or something ridiculous. And that was it. And then, all right, they signed off. Your brain's okay. Now, this was a long time ago. But some commissions still just do that. Some commissions do little stuff. Now, one thing I'll say, having been in this 20 years, I don't recall ever, right now sitting here, a fighter that they wanted to fight who couldn't pass medicals. And bear in mind, I've worked for M1, Affliction, Bellator, and UFC. I don't ever recall. Now, I've seen fighters have a bad cut or something like that, or do something backstage, and the commission saw it and yanked them. I've seen that. I've never heard of, we wanted this guy to fight, but he couldn't pass medicals. Now, bear in mind, Vanderlei Silva got a license to fight in New York. Kimbo Slice, right before he died of a cardiac issue. Dada 5000, who had a cardiac issue backstage. All these guys were licensed to fight. Ken Shamrock were all licensed to fight. They were all cleared. You're medically ready to go. And they got a license. So Vanderlei Silva publicly complained of CTE issues. I read articles about it and he was licensed to fight. So it's the idea that something will intervene. It won't intervene. The only thing that will intervene is promotions not wanting to sign BJ Penn. And what the UFC knows is if we don't do it, somebody's going to do it. So it might as well be with us. The only thing that would keep BJ Penn from fighting is if one, PFL, Bellator, and the UFC all got together and went, we're not having BJ Penn. Then he might fight in his own promotion in Hawaii, for all we know. There's no independent check. There's no independent balance. There's no independent, is this fighter ready? It doesn't. If the promoter wants you and you have a big name, you can probably pass medicals. It's not that hard. So that's the tough part, is there's nothing stopping him from fighting until it's all over. It's crazy that there isn't some kind of, people have like this assumption that there's something would stop him from fighting. Nothing would if he wanted to keep going and going and going and going and going. The only thing that stopped, if you remember back to the Chuck Liddell, Matt Hughes days, he got a cush job with the UFC. If he hadn't had that, he could have kept going. And remember, he was licensed to fight against Tito Ortiz at his age and what he had been through, the number of knockouts. Still got a license, so you can still do it. But the only thing that keeps a fighter from fighting is they don't want to anymore. If they want to, they're hard to stop. They're really hard to stop. And it's mercenary, and you can not like it, but what the UFC is addressing is, look, he's going to fight for somebody because he wants to keep fighting. Might as well fight for us. So you can only stop your involvement in it. And I think their attitude behind the scenes is we're not going to let him go to Bellator and sell out in Hawaii with Ilima-Lei Macfarlane when we can avoid it. So he would literally have to keep going until he can't pass a medical check. And I have seen medical checks in states that my 90-year-old grandmother could pass. Literally a 90-year-old could pass. Like stand on one foot, touch your nose. Like a 90-year-old can do that, who's sharp enough, who doesn't have dementia or something. So, man, I've just seen checks. I was like, anybody could pass this. Where I've seen fighters pass medical checks and then tell me, like, yeah, my knees are shot, my this is shot, my that. And you're like, they didn't catch this. And, it depends on what commission it is and what they ask for. So the idea that he would stop because he's incapable of continuing, that's a long time. That's a long time. Chris Lieben couldn't pass a cardiac check for Bellator, which is probably more extensive than a commission would do because they wanted to test him out to make sure he's worth the investment. He didn't pass it. What happens? He fights bare knuckle. Somebody will always take you. And that's what the UFC is reacting to. So that's the issue I don't think enough people are talking about, is that there's no real check on a fighter's willingness to continue. And BJ Penn, for all the wrong reasons, is willing to continue.